On November 13, 1974, only one member of the DeFeo family of 7 survived, the one who killed the rest. On this day, their home in the small town of Amityville would become infamous throughout the United States. A true massacre took place in the beautiful High Hopes mansion. 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot his entire family. His victims included 6 people: his parents, Ronald and Louise, as well as his 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters. The murders happened at night, while the entire family was asleep. Armed with a .35 caliber hunting rifle, he went from room to room, killing each of them one by one as they slept peacefully in their beds. First, he entered his parents' bedroom. Then he moved on to his siblings' rooms and methodically executed 18-year-old Dawn, 13-year-old Allison, 12-year-old Mark, and 9-year-old John. Each family member was found with a gunshot wound to the head, all lying face down in their pillows, as if someone had placed them that way. Yet, there was no evidence that the killer had moved their bodies. So, did they all happen to be sleeping face down just moments before their deaths? Forensic analysis determined that all the murders occurred within a 15-minute time frame. Later, it would be revealed that the rifle used had no silencer. So, why didn't anyone in the house wake up from the sound of the gunshots? At first, investigators suspected that Ronald had drugged his relatives, but toxicology reports came back with a clear negative result. According to the manufacturer, the .35 caliber Marlin rifle produces such a deafening blast that it can be heard from nearly a kilometer away when fired. Yet not only did the victims themselves remain silent, but numerous neighbors, whose homes were just 50 meters from the DeFeo residence, heard absolutely nothing. What could have driven a young man to commit such an atrocity against his own family? The entire case was shrouded in mystery, and to this day, no definitive answers have been found. During the trial, Ronald DeFeo Jr. claimed that mysterious voices had commanded him to carry out the massacre. He stated that he first heard them in his dreams, and later while awake. It was as if the walls of the house were speaking to him, ordering him to kill his entire family. Or else, something even more horrific would happen. It was also known that DeFeo had a history of drug abuse. His defense attorney argued in court that Ronald was insane and had committed the murders without being fully aware of his actions. But were drugs to blame, or had Ronald DeFeo Jr. truly encountered something supernatural? Regardless, after evaluating him, a forensic psychiatrist diagnosed DeFeo with antisocial personality disorder, a condition that indicated he was fully aware of his actions and responsible for them. In the end, a New York state court sentenced him to 150 years in prison, 25 years for each murder. The killer was locked away, the victims were buried, and the house was put up for sale. Without a doubt, the house had earned a terrible reputation, making it difficult to sell. However, surprisingly, less than a year later, a family willing to overlook its dark past decided to buy it and move in. A man named George Lutz and his wife Kathy agreed to purchase the infamous Amityville House. The main selling point for them was the significantly reduced price, far below market value. Interestingly, they were also a large family. The couple had 2 sons, aged 7 and 9, and a 4-year-old daughter. Notably, George and Kathy did not hide the house's grim history from their children. Instead, they openly asked them whether they would feel comfortable sleeping in the same bedrooms where the horrific murders had taken place. The children agreed without hesitation. Although George was determined to buy the house, he still decided to take precautions on the very first day. He invited a priest to bless the home. Local priest Father Ralph Pecoraro, well aware of the house's dark history, was not at all surprised by this request. The blessing ritual went smoothly, except for one unsettling moment. As soon as the priest stepped into the bedroom where little Mark and John DeFeo had been murdered, he suddenly broke into a cold sweat and rushed out. He couldn't explain what had happened, but he left the Lutz family with a chilling warning. "I beg you, do not make this a children's bedroom." Despite this eerie encounter, the Lutz family moved into their new home the very next day, December 18, 1975. They would last only 28 days before fleeing in terror, abandoning all their belongings inside. The first night passed without incident, and George Lutz even felt reassured, dismissing the priest's warning as nothing more than superstition. But on the second day, strange things began to happen. At first, the family heard mysterious creaking floorboards, as if someone was walking around. Then, doors started opening and closing on their own. On the second night, the sounds became even more disturbing. The family began to hear footsteps on the staircase, as if someone was repeatedly going up and down. By the third night, the strange noises suddenly stopped. But what happened next was even more horrifying. A putrid stench of rotting flesh spread throughout every room in the house. No matter what they did, they couldn't get rid of it. Then, one of the Lutz children claimed he had seen green slime oozing from the walls of his room. However, since there was no physical evidence, his parents assumed he was simply imagining things. But what troubled George and Kathy Lutz the most was their 4-year-old daughter, Missy. She claimed to have made a new imaginary friend named Jody. No one else could see Jody, but Missy insisted that she lived in the house with them and that they often talked about different things. One day, Jody told Missy something chilling.
"You and your parents will live in this house for the rest of your lives."
At first, the Lutzes dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination. But then, something even more disturbing happened. One night, George Lutz woke up feeling thirsty. As he got out of bed, he noticed that Kathy was sleeping face down, something he had never seen her do before. Feeling uneasy, he walked through the house to check on their children. When he entered their bedrooms, his blood ran cold. Both of his kids were also sleeping face down, just like the DeFeo family members were found after they had been murdered. Perhaps the final straw for the Lutz family came one terrifying night, when Kathy's body suddenly lifted into the air, levitating above the bed for several seconds. George witnessed everything, but found himself completely paralyzed, unable to move or speak. The next morning, George immediately called Father Pecoraro and told him everything that had been happening in the house. The priest wasn't surprised. Instead, he asked just one question.
"Why are you still living there?"
That was it. George made his decision. They had to leave immediately. He told Kathy they would put the house up for sale and move out as soon as possible. She agreed without hesitation, but it was as if the house had heard their conversation, as if it understood their plan and refused to let them go. The house became even more sinister. Whispers, footsteps, and malicious laughter echoed through the rooms. The temperature inside fluctuated wildly. One moment it was stiflingly hot, and the next it would suddenly drop below freezing. At that point, George and Kathy made a final desperate decision. They had to leave immediately. On January 14, 1976, the Lutz family fled the house without taking any of their belongings. They simply got in their car with the children and drove away, never looking back again. Logically, the next step was to sell the house. But before putting it on the market, George Lutz decided to cleanse the home of whatever dark presence lingered inside. At the time, so-called ghost hunters were becoming popular in the US, so George reached out to the best of the best, Ed and Lorraine Warren. By then, the house had already gained a terrifying reputation nationwide, so the Warrens didn't come alone. They brought a full film crew to document the event. According to Ed and Lorraine, the moment they stepped inside, They immediately felt an evil presence, one stronger than anything they had ever encountered before. After performing a spiritual cleansing, they declared the exorcism a success, assuring the Lutzes that within a few days, all evil forces would leave the house. But it didn't work. When George returned to the house, he was immediately hit by the stench of rotting flesh. Then he heard footsteps on the staircase, the same eerie sounds that had tormented them before. Without hesitation, he ran out of the house terrified. The ghost hunters refused to admit defeat. They claimed that the evil in the house was so deeply embedded in its very walls that the only solution was to demolish it completely. Desperate, the Lutzes brought in several more specialists to try and rid the home of its darkness. But nothing worked. Accepting that they would never be able to cleanse the house, they gave up and handed it back to the bank. Over time, the story became so sensational that it inspired numerous books, which sold in huge numbers and gained worldwide fame. This immense popularity caught the attention of filmmakers, leading to the creation of over 10 movies about the terrifying events at 112 Ocean Avenue. Most of these films were highly successful, generating millions in revenue for their creators. As the legend of the Amityville Horror grew, Ronald DeFeo Jr., the man who had committed the brutal murders, made a bizarre demand from prison. He insisted that he should be released, claiming that he needed to reunite with the house. DeFeo also argued that all the books and films should focus solely on him, as he believed he was the true source of the house's evil. Of course, his plea was ignored, and he remained behind bars for the rest of his life, eventually dying in prison in 2021. Despite its horrific past, the infamous house has had several new owners over the years. It has been sold 4 times, with its price increasing each time, proving that even a history soaked in blood and terror can still hold value in the real estate market. It's important to note that none of the new owners ever reported hearing strange sounds or experiencing the events that plagued the Lutz family. There were no odors, no slime, and certainly no imaginary friends. So what really happened? Could it be that the house cleansing ritual was indeed successful? Or perhaps the spirits that once haunted the home simply decided to leave the residents in peace? Another theory suggests that the Lutz family invented the entire story, possibly to profit from it by writing a book and selling the rights, making a fortune in the process. However, the truth remains elusive, and the questions surrounding the haunting of 112 Ocean Avenue will likely never be answered. What is certain is that the house in Amityville has earned a reputation that it will never lose. Over the years, its name has become synonymous with fear and mystery, and it will forever be etched in the annals of the paranormal.